So hello everyone, welcome to the Ampliarium channel. We are starting today the first series to talk about innovation. The series is called It's Time to Be Real, because we think it's so important to be real when we are talking about innovation. And I'm super honored to have two very special guests with me today, former colleagues that have a lot to share with us, have an amazing case. So I'll take some time just to briefly introduce myself and the two of them, and then we will start a chat. And we would love to hear your comments or feedbacks once you see the video here. So my name is Denise Pereira de Carvalho. I'm graduated in business with specialization in innovation and entrepreneurship. So I have spent my career in sales, marketing, foreign trade. In the last 6 years, I had the honor to lead the Brazil Innovation Center for a big multinational company, where I had the pleasure to receive over 10,000 people. During this time, I dedicated myself to the research and practice of design thinking, especially, together with other innovation tools, developing training sessions to over 1,000 people in more than 12 countries, including China, US, Denmark. I'm also a Lego Serious Play facilitator, which is another passion regarding tools for innovation. And I devote my time also in the study of cosmology, trying to understand how different people see the universe. And most recently, I have been studying the history of meditation and techniques of attention, because it's so important to be present. So all that experience led me to create Ampliarium, which is an innovation company designed for human development through innovation, with the intent to help customers to innovate with their final customers. And I'm super honored to have here my two special guests. So I will start with Guada Franzosi. She's graduated MS in chemical engineering from the Instituto Tecnologico de Buenos Aires and has an MBA from the Universidad de San Andres, both in Argentina. Guada is Argentinian. She has worked for more than 2 decades for the DuPont company. She started her career in the field technical sales in Argentina and has since held a variety of leadership roles in sales, marketing, business development, and management, including regional and global leadership roles based from Brazil and the USA. She's passionate about business development and sustainability. She launched 2 entrepreneurial businesses within DuPont, the most recent one called Second Life Materials, focused on circular economy, where she led the business development team over the past 3 years. Throughout her career, she has engaged with a variety of markets, including polymer compounding, food packaging, footwear, automotive, construction, ballistic, composites, personal protection, textiles, ONG, leading innovation efforts and demonstrating growth across Latin America as well as in global roles. Welcome, Guada. Pleasure to have you. And we also have Lee Richardson. Lee has been the global technology leader of DuPont's Second Life Materials circular economy venture since its inception 3.5 years ago. In his 16 years within DuPont, he has conducted research and led R&D and application development teams from ideation through successful commercialization of innovations across a variety of markets, including medical devices, consumer goods, fire protection, and aerospace. Lee has a BS and PhD degrees in chemical engineering from Virginia Tech and MIT, and is passionate about driving collaborative innovation cross-functionally and with customers instead of for customers. I love that one. Welcome. Honored and pleasure to have you both. So I would like to start. The series is called It's Time to Be Real. I think especially after COVID and all the transformation we have been through, I would like to start by asking you guys, why it's so important to be real when we are talking about innovation? Who's starting?
Okay, so I'll start. So in my experience, every time we had to innovate, you couldn't do it by yourself, right? You're doing it with other people. And whether they're from your company, whether they are a customer, whether they are a university, you're dealing with other people. You're going to try things, you're going to fail, you're going to try them again. You're going to share things that you know that other people don't know, and you hope the same happens with the rest. And to do that, to share, to become vulnerable, to have ideas that get crushed, to have ideas that you build on, you need psychological safety, right? You need to be safe. You need to feel you can be yourself. You can bring your ideas to the table the way they're in your head. You can say what you think, and that the other person is going to do the same. If you're putting up an idea that doesn't sound good, you expect them to tell you it's not a good idea, and this is why. To do that, you need to be real. You need to be honest, transparent, and you need to worry about the task that you have in front of you instead of the environment you're in.
I couldn't agree more, and I think in addition, innovation is challenging. It's very difficult, right? It's difficult as a team. It's difficult as individuals, and so you really, to Guada's point, you have to have that psychological safety to, as a team, to be frustrated, to challenge each other. And if you have to get to do true innovation, you have to get to the core of people's creativity, and so they have to be unencumbered to share that creativity, and also to allow each other to build upon it. Because I think innovation, as Guada said, it really is about it requires lots of people working together and building on each other's ideas, and that really means that you have to be very open. And you have to, I'll be honest, it's also emotional. I mean, coming up with something new it strikes a chord on everyone's emotions. You have good days and bad days, and you really have to have that psychological safety to be able to share very openly, and to also be open to others building and adding and having those same emotions. So.
Denise, one other thing that I'm thinking about is when you engage with someone, particularly a customer, right? When you engage with a customer to innovate, there's so many things you could work on, right? Which is the one? You don't know. So when you start, you don't know. You potentially have, the typical brainstorming session where you have, 50 ideas and you bring it down to 20, you bring it back to 10. Which is the one you're going to work on? And why do we always ask which one? It's because we have lack of resources, because it's expensive. At times it's expensive, whether it's time or whether it's, testing, or whether it's the fact that because you're working on this, you're not working on something else. So there's an opportunity cost as well. So you want customers to tell you if you're working on the wrong thing. You want to be real about it. Is this going to help you? And if the customer doesn't see that's helping them, they should feel free to tell. They should feel compelled to tell you that that's not what they want to work on.
And what I think you're touching a very important point, because before that, we need to be comfortable with not knowing, right? I think it's a
absolutely
key point that you're touching. I usually say that innovation is a space of not knowing. And I think we were not taught, we're not raised not to know, right? So I think it's important, and that's why this series, my intention is to bring the reality. And when you say it's emotional, I love that, because I think the idea of the channel is to create this space to talk about things that usually people don't talk about. For example, how uncomfortable we are with not knowing, right? So we want to have the answers. I guess maybe corporate environment leads you to know, and how scary it is not to know. And I think the not knowing in the space of what is obvious, we are so afraid of asking obvious questions. So how do you guys see that in real life?
So I think it is it is a huge disservice, but it is very real that we are afraid to in you know, in the setting, in our settings, typical settings at work, to ask questions, right? Because really that's the only, like, curiosity and having the agility to learn are really the only ways that you can explore and find new things, and that is at the core of innovation, right? um, and yes, there's a typically a culture and I mean, I would say it tends to be pretty global, but you know, certainly it's found in large companies where you feel like you have to portray yourself as an expert um, all the time, right? And that's why you're afraid to ask the question that basically says, I don't know, I'm not sure, and it's okay to also to not have the answer, right? To say, hey, we need to go explore and find more about this. um, and so I think it's really a disservice when we don't reward people who are willing to, ask questions, even difficult ones, and even challenge the status quo, right? Why do we do things the way we do? Because those are the people that are the real innovators. They really are. They're leading on a path to innovation.
There's also an expected behavior that you have in big organizations, that you tend to call it a culture. And so there's a behavior that leaders portray, that set the culture of the organization, and that gets it flows down, right? So people start behaving in the same way, and following the same type of processes. And once you follow, and that there's nothing bad with that, because if you don't, that is complete chaos, and I'm not advocating for chaos. But when you innovate, that is not how you arrive to ideas, because you don't know. It's not a process where like a sausage machine that you put these ingredients, you get the sausage on the other side. It doesn't work like that. You don't know where you're going to end. You might start on one thing and end on something completely different, but substantially more relevant. And so when you start requiring a specific process and start putting things in a specific path, you kill everything that's outside of it. You kill every possibility, every opportunity of somebody bringing something different. You stop questioning, why are we doing it the way we do it? And when you stop questioning, back to Lee's point on creativity and curiosity, when you stop questioning, you kill that nature of the innovation process. And that's why you see so many startups, because people cannot just stop questioning. They just go do it somewhere else, right? And big organizations have this issue with culture and disruption, and a behavior that you hire for people to manage, and innovation is about creation, and so the skill sets are different.
So
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just an example. So Guada and I built a team. So it started with the two of us, and then built a team that was specifically focused on innovating very creatively in a new space that we in our business didn't have a lot of experience in, and a couple of things that we did, because it is about the culture that you set for the team that you develop. From day one, Guada and I, as the leaders of the team, we actually purposely challenged each other, asked each other a lot of questions in front of the team, so that the team became very comfortable with the fact that not only can they ask a lot of questions amongst the team, but they could also ask and challenge us, and that is about the culture that you set from day one. And the other piece to that too, about processes, right? One of the things, so as we had project report outs, we didn't give them any kind of template. So we started and we said, you each report out to us on your programs, in whatever format you see fit, right? And so the first ones were all over the map, right? But what we did is you reinforce the things that work, and the things that don't, you actually take ideas from each other. So you saw the team actually, someone would do a really interesting approach, and then when it worked well, someone from the others on the team would adopt it, and it built over time, that this capability. But it's not linear, right? But really, not forcing a process or a template on folks allows for that creativity. So those are a couple of examples that I think are very relevant, but it is about the culture that you build among the team.
And the funny part about that is it's more challenging on the manager, because you cannot just set your head and say, okay, this is going to be the first slide, this is going to be the second slide. You kind of have to adapt yourself to the person you're innovating with. And it's much easier to say, this is the process, this is the template we follow.
Sure.
And I do it always the same way, and you adapt to me. And what we were doing is we were saying, you think in the way you think. We'll try and understand you, right? In a certain way, that's what we were doing. And it required a lot of us, because every time we were switching projects and the project leader was presenting in a different way, we had to try to follow. And so at the beginning it was fuzzy. But as Lee said, the team started learning from each other. Is this magical thing happened where someone said, you know what, that visual slide you had, that was really good. I'm gonna adopt that for my next presentation somewhere in our next face-to-face. One liked one thing and the other one had another thing that was very good. And so without asking for a template, we kind of arrived to a very similar way of presenting with pieces of different people. And we would have never gotten there if we had started with a fixed mindset of this is the way you do it.
That is so valuable. Actually, I was going to ask what you guys could say to leaders that are watching us. And I think you said great comments about how to inspire and again, how to be open and require this emotional balance, right, leader, you were talking about, because to do all that, first you need to be good with yourself, you need to be well, right? You need to be open, you need to be curious about how others do their work, right? And in the end, you don't waste others' creativity, right? When you set the stage in the process, as you're saying you did not do, Guada, you let it open for people to create for themselves. So I think that's amazing.
It is a different stage. When you're creating, it is a different stage than when you have already decided and you're in an execution phase, where the invention part, if you will, invention could be a business model. It doesn't have to be this super duper new thing that never hit the earth before. But whatever new thing you're bringing to, there's a moment of creating it. And once the idea it's vetted, you have to bring it to life. That is discipline. That's an execution phase. And there are 100 different processes you can follow to do that. Each company has its own, each manager might have its own, or the entire company might follow a specific language around project management. That is fine. That is project management. The word says it's management. Mm-hmm. Innovation is not management. Innovation has to do with creation. Of course, you have to have a way of balancing projects. Why are you going to pick this one and not that one? Eventually, if you're good at it, you're going to have more projects than you can have resources. And so you have to choose. So there are ways and processes to choose. But the bringing the idea, the coming up with the idea to solve a problem, because to me, innovation is there is a problem and I'm coming with a novelty, with a way to solve this problem that others did not, whether it was ourselves, whether it was our competitors, didn't do it before. That's why it's innovation. Once that moment of creation, it's gone, then it comes management. So there's like two phases. I think companies have an issue with the creation piece. And then they might also have an issue with how real they are about that innovation. maybe their pipeline is not that big, and so they're afraid to kill that project because they know it's not good, but it's the only one they have. And that's an issue as well, right? Because you're not innovating enough, you don't have enough of a pipeline, and so you work on things that are not necessarily going to be meaningful for your customers.
When you have to choose, you have a good problem, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. But you know, even when you don't have a huge pipeline yet, and you're trying to build it to, you know, to the point of our conversation, you have to be real, and that's another way in which you have to be real with your organization, with your broader organization. You know, if something's not good and you don't see the future in it, right? You don't see the value that it's going to create. You have to be comfortable to tell your organization that we shouldn't be working on this. We should be working on something else. That is a real problem in large companies where obviously I mean, it's a huge undertaking to create the growth that they need, right? Because the larger you get, the more difficult, you know, it gets to to meet your growth targets, right? And so but that's coming back to being real. That's another way that you have to be real about your portfolio, right? What, you know, I know I've experienced I've seen programs where someone knew there was a showstopper, right, somewhere, and were afraid to raise their hand and say, look, you know, we should be working on something different. So, but if you do innovation well, to Guada's point, you will, and you have the right people who have the right mindset and work well, and you create the right team that can do that together. You will create a pipeline that is more where you have to make the choices, and that's actually really fun. I mean, it is when you get to a point where, and that's a mindset shift for a lot of people to say, yeah, I'm going to raise my hand and say I should be, you know, we should be working on something that's more valuable over here, instead of what you've been working on, which is, by the way, still valuable and interesting, but we have to say no to this for now, so you can work on something that's more valuable. That's actually a really fun place to be in, but people have to get used to making those choices.
And you are talking about trust, right, Lee? I think to have the environment you're talking again to inspire the leaders that are watching us, how we create this environment of trust, right? That people can stand for what they think and share.
A lot of trust comes from showing yourself vulnerable as a leader. So what Lee was saying when we started the team, and you know, we would agree. So he would, and I, you know, I would challenge. He would present, and I would say, well, why do you say that? Why not this? And so we would start discussions in the team. And they would look at us like, you know, these two are crazy. Of course, our situation, we were co-leaders. So, you know, it was a 50-50 JV where, although each of us wanted the 51%, we didn't have it. We had 50-50, so we had to come to an agreement, right? But that forced us to discuss from day one. And so, you know, we started that way. We never had something different. We started it that way.
That's amazing.
And so,
and Guada, sorry for interrupting. I was going to ask you to keep going and share with our audience. You guys worked in an amazing case, right, from the scratch. I think you came. This is a very interesting and real time it's really time to be real with your case, because you started from nothing. A very interesting project. I would like you to explain to the guys who are watching us. It touches sustainability, circular economy. So from zero to a very impressive growth. Can you share with us how it developed and how being real to innovation helped you guys?
Lee, go ahead. You were there from before we became what we became.
Sure. So a little over four to 5 years ago, I got involved with a group in our business, working with some external consultants, and we were exploring like how we could grow in different spaces from where our core business operated today. And so it was a great exercise and experience. But from that, we drilled down to several possible spaces that we could operate in, and so actually the leadership team for our business decided that they would invest sort of in, we eventually called them ventures, but that they would invest in exploring these spaces. And so one of them was this idea of sustainability. It was very broad and open when it was brought to us. But I happen to have been both passionate about and a champion of this, and through the and in the midst of the process, Guada was involved at some point too, and we had similar ideas on this particular space. We were both passionate about it. And by the way, we didn't know each other before before this. So they actually asked. So the leadership team asked me and Guada if we would be willing to basically go explore this space of sustainability and see what value we might be able to create for the business. And one of the key things was they actually, so this again, there's a little bit of psychological safety there, but I think they took us out of two important roles in the business, and put us into something that we had no idea if we were going to come up empty or if we were going to come up with some really great opportunities for the business. And I will, so the leaders, I thank them and pat them on the back for giving us, for saying, hey, you know what, if you all are valuable to us beyond this, but if you come up empty, there's certainly, other things we want to have you doing, but feel, we want you to go out and find out honestly if there are opportunities in this space. So Guada and I started working together, me from as the technology leader, her as the commercial leader, and they told us, they said, act like a startup, like act like you guys are the CTO and the CEO of of a small startup, and go and explore the space and then tell us. And so we actually went out broadly looking at sustainability for I would say 3 months, really digging in. And again, it was about going out and seeing what are others doing. It was about talking to customers, and we quickly realized that that we had a great opportunity to play in the circular economy space and to be leaders, quite honestly, because DuPont is a material producer, right? And so we play a critical role there, and we also are we're a leader when it comes to science and technology, and we can put that to work to work with our value chains to create a circular economy, because the circular economy requires everyone in a value chain to A, participate, and B, to find value for it to really be sustainable. But we could certainly, as DuPont, I think, be a leader in making that happen. And so then we began to formulate, I would say, we saw some opportunities. We began to chart some opportunities, and then define a strategy, and then we began to work, the two of us, on starting to, how would we execute some of the opportunities, some of the lower hanging fruit, because we knew it was very important that we prove that this is actually doable, not something that's many years out, that we needed to prove up front that it's very doable. And we quickly got to the point where they wanted to, what we were talking about was tangible enough that they wanted to offer us to build a team, and honestly, they wanted us to build the team probably sooner than we felt we were ready. So that's one of those things where you want to make sure that you have a clear vision on what your strategy is going to be and how you're going to execute things before, so that you can define the right type of people to bring into the right roles in a new organization. So I mean, maybe Guada or like.
So you asked the questions, what do you tell leaders? So first of all, you're in it for a fight, if you will. You're gonna do things differently, and so in our case, it was resisting forming a team from day one, because if you don't know what you're set to do, how do you hire
So you guys were resisting. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
So both,
I was going to ask exactly that. What are the behaviors or the emotions you have to deal with, or you had to deal with, to go
so at the
that
beginning,
stage?
right. So at the beginning, it was a lot of just holding the pressure because,
Yeah.
you know, corporate America, we had an idea, we have to put all this resources and budget on our idea, but you haven't refined the idea. You don't know where you're going. So if you tell me I'm going to do a 100-mile trip, I'm going to prepare in one way. And if you tell me I'm going to do a 2,000-mile trip, I'm going to prepare in a different way. If I prepare for the 2,000 miles, you know, just to do 100, I'm going to take longer. It's going to be much more expensive than I need to. And if I prepare for a 100-mile trip and then I find out I have to do, you know, 20 times that, then I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be able to make it. So you need to know where you're trying to get to see what type of skills you bring in.
You
And
didn't,
so,
right? And you didn't
and we
know.
didn't at the very beginning. We didn't. We
Yeah.
couldn't. And so we were asking for time. And I remember we joked, and I said, you know, I always say this analogy. Lee will laugh, but it takes a pregnant woman 9 months to give birth, and if you put 9 women, you won't get a child in a month. Right? It still takes 9 months to give birth. Right? So sometimes you need time. You need time because you need to see something that could be, you know, that could bring you to a crossroad where you could go right or left. And if you're going right, it's going to require some types of skills. And if you're going left, and it's a lottery if you try to do it. It's too expensive to fail that guess.
Would you say
versus
it's the
wait.
hardest? Sorry, Guada. Would you say it's the hardest part, this beginning of the unknown?
It is. It is hard in the sense that people want, when leadership has bought in, they want to support you, and they do not want to say you failed because we didn't support you. So they want, you know, if I put more dollars, I'll get it faster. And that is not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and certain experiments take a certain amount of time. And if you're doing weathering, you need time to do weathering. And yeah, you could speed it a little bit here and there, but you're not going to do it for tomorrow. It doesn't matter if you have more money. It just takes time. And so being able to push back, that's a skill you're going to need at certain points. But at the same time, on one side, you're pushing back. Then further on, as we were developing projects, we were taking risks. And so it kind of sounds counterintuitive, right? That you're pushing back. It sounds like you're cautious, but then I'm telling you, take risks. So one thing that we did is we kind of accepted that whatever we made wasn't going to be right. That was like our, you know, overarching principle. Whatever we do, it's not going to be good enough. It's going to be good enough to start a discussion on why it's not what we want.
And that's okay, right?
And that's okay. Yes. That's okay because it helps that creation process.
Yes.
So one of the things that Lee's team did a lot was prototyping. So my team would just, you know, try to create the relationship to have this psychological safety, so that Lee and his team could come in with an imperfect prototype. Yes. That's how we called them. It was it's your first shot. So it's going to be imperfect.
I call it low fidelity.
Yeah.
Right.
Low fidelity. It is.
It is.
But you know what? But it really shows. So it shows the potential customers or partners that you're trying to engage. There's a couple things it does actually. Well, so one is, you know, it starts a conversation, right? So there's something about tactile, like being able to touch and feel something and see it in real time, that creates a conversation, and the imperfections are great because, you know, the customer or partner will tell you, like what's wrong with it. Can you do this? Can you change this? And those are all the critical things that you need to learn early on, as you. Right, as you're done. But it does something else.
Simple things that will tell you 100 technical characteristics, and then when you put the sample, they'll say it's not gray.
It's not gray. Yeah.
Exactly.
And you're like, what? And they're like, we need it gray. It has to be, or it's not black. And you're like, okay.
I never thought of that. It didn't cross to me.
You never asked, what color does the sample have to be? Or, or things,
and
it's small things like this. It's trivial things, or, it's not wide enough.
Yeah.
Or it's not long enough.
And they'll tell you things about their process that you don't know, right? You haven't seen their process. They might even walk you out and say, well, look, it's got to be able to run through this kind of process. And it's really critical. The other thing it does is if you prototype repeatedly over and over again, and you're putting things in front of the customer, it actually shows them true responsiveness, right? It shows the customer that you care enough to go back, that maybe you heard them the first time and you came back. Maybe again, it's not the second time might not be the perfect prototype, but that you heard them and you improved upon it. So it's an iterative process.
And it's funny because traditionally you would think I need the perfect prototype so that the customer trusts me that I can do the work. Actually, every time you fail and you're like, oh my God, now I see it. The fact that you recognize that you failed and you didn't know, you go back, you do your homework, and you bring a second prototype, that exponentially increases trust. And so customers start sharing more. And as Lee said, they would tell you, what, come to the plant with me. I'll show you why this
They belong. You create belonging, right?
You create belonging, and it comes to a point where as much as you want to succeed, they want you to succeed. As much as you want.
They are.
As you want, exactly.
They buy in almost emotionally as they're doing it, right? But you know what? It comes back to something we talked about earlier. Is typically we want to paint ourselves, particularly in front of a customer, as an expert, right? As someone who knows everything and is putting only the best in front of them. But when you present something that's imperfect, you open yourself up. You're being vulnerable, and you're saying, look, this isn't perfect. I'm very comfortable telling you I don't know it all, and this is imperfect. So help me make it better for you, right? And that's very powerful.
You're building with them.
You're building with them.
Yes.
And they have this feeling, back to your point, Denise, of with versus for the customer. It's not your project anymore. It's our project.
Exactly.
Yes.
And when it's our project, they'll get time in the line to test your prototypes. They'll tell you, they'll give you competitive samples. They want you to win. They want you to get it right. So they will help you. And it creates a great working relationship. It's like you're all from the same, it feels like you're all from the same company trying to get this thing across the finish line together. But that is risk-taking. When you're going to present a prototype, you could always come across somebody that is expecting you to be the know-it-all and who wants the perfect prototype. So you are kind of, on a leap of faith, presenting something to be criticized, and you have to be open to criticism, right?
I think you guys are giving a free class of design thinking, and to your comments, to me, the game changer in design thinking are two things that usually I think we neglect. First, empathy, really deep diving, and empathy is not quick. Back again to the pregnant woman, right? It's not, let's do one workshop, one afternoon, let's put everybody together and then you find out everything. It's not like that. We all know this, right? We all have been there to the brainstorming with Post-its and stuff, nothing against it, but it doesn't work in itself alone. So empathy and the prototyping phase, which is a game changer completely because of all you explained. And it's a super powerful way of communicating. The example of the color is just amazing because it didn't even cross your mind at all. You're so worried about the technical, which is, by the way, something very usual, right? We are worrying if it's technical, if it's doable, if it's financially viable, and we forget about the desire and some of the things.
The other thing I would tell you is, Lee and I are hybrid people, and that helped a lot.
Explain.
So in companies, you tend to specialize, right? And so technical people, you want them to be very technical, very thorough on the way they they test things, and you know, their science, etc. And the commercial people, you expect them to be extremely savvy at establishing relationships and nurturing them, and, you know, opening opportunities, and then just step out, let the technical team do their work. And then, so it's kind of siloed. I've worked in commercial roles most of my life, but I'm an engineer and I love the technical aspect of things. Lee has worked on the technical side, but he hasn't worked in a lab in R&D by himself. He's worked in application development, so he's always had to engage with customers. So he has a very strong commercial sense. And so when you're building, it's like you have this baton that you pass back and forth between the technical development and the commercial value that you're bringing. And you have to test it 100 times until you go through that finish line. And at times it could be the roadblock is a technical aspect, but then you figured that out, but it comes out too expensive. And so you iterate. It's not linear. It's not like you solve one problem, you move to the next. Sometimes you solve one and you move, you know, 2 steps back, and then you'll move 10 forward. It's not just one by one by one. And things sometimes as you're developing, because of a technical limitation or because of a commercial limitation, whether it's I don't know, logistics or cost or whatever it is. It could be branding, it could be channel. It takes you on a tangent, on a different path that you could have never known a year before or 6 months before if you hadn't come to that point. You would have never had that discussion, because when you're starting, you don't know what you don't know. You cannot have the path. People think innovation is you have an idea of where you are, you have an idea where you want to get, and you just draw a line and you just follow that path and get there. If it were that easy, everybody would be doing it, right? Yeah. So it's not that straightforward, and you don't know when you're going to deviate, for how long, and whether that's taking you on a completely different path or is going to bring back to where you. So
yeah, I was just gonna add. So, and I mean, I think that having that hybrid capability and there's a mindset, right? As we were building a team to focus very much on innovation and in a creative way, right? So you're looking for people with that similar type of capability, right? You know, a person who's, you know, a commercial or business development type person, but who has a technical background and loves, and when you talk to them, you can tell that they're technically minded, right? But obviously they're going to manage relationships and open doors to find opportunities, right? And on the same side, on the technical side, we're looking for people that we can turn loose with a customer, right? And feel comfortable, not only that they can manage a relationship to a degree, but also that they know how to ask the right questions and communicate in a way that the customer understands and will open up to them, right? And so, what's interesting, and I think one of the interesting things in our journey, you go through different phases, especially in a startup within anywhere, but also even within a large company. Very early, we were very focused. The first people we added to the team were very much, I would say, all in that sort of category, right? And we paired them up, so sort of the same way that Guada and I would pair up in the first stage, and so they, you'd have a commercial and technical person exploring a certain space and a certain set of customers and potential markets, maybe, or opportunities. But what's interesting, when you get far enough, so that creativity comes into play, and you create this huge portfolio of opportunities, and then you have to make some choices and actually go and really execute. A lot of times, the people that are going to help you execute in certain aspects of the execution are not the same mindset that those creative folks that you needed very early in the innovation space, but they have to be open enough to be able to work very well with that that other mindset of creativity, right? You have to, I mean, because you got creative people bouncing all over the place sometimes and going in different directions, and someone who's a disciplined execution type person, a lot of times that can drive them crazy, right? So there has to be, as a special person who can be that disciplined, but at the same time kind of walk that meandering walk that we described is really about,
they can kind of translate the chaos
yes,
of this diverging mind into the execution of a converging mind. And so you start out of need forming a team with people that have that ability to drive processes for certain things, like logistics, like project management, without killing the other entrepreneurial type of mentality. And people understand their function in their team, and they're like, okay, this is where I'm going to question you. But they're questioning not to force a process or a way of doing it, not whether your way is right or mine is right. They're questioning to understand, because everybody sees that it's a baton race. So it doesn't matter if I'm the fastest runner. When I have the baton, I have to pass it to somebody else. And if I don't pass it properly, then we're going to lose the race as a team.
You use diversity in your favor in that point.
And you need diversity. Absolutely.
You need that. And
yes.
I think the common denominator to make it powerful is that everybody should be customer oriented, right? If everybody with very different skills and approaches and mindsets, but if all of them are customer oriented, then you have a good mix, even if they are very different, right? And
but it comes, and it's more than just being customer oriented, because everybody says I'm customer oriented. I don't think anybody goes to work to say, I'm going to do something today to piss off my customer and not deliver a product or not deliver a service. So you start from the basis that people are trying to do their best. How is what you're doing translating to value to the customer?
Perfect.
Sometimes it's not clear.
Yeah.
And you think you're doing the task that you have to do in the best possible way, but do you understand how and why that is bringing value? And because we were a small entrepreneurial team, we didn't have that complexity of we're in a 5,000 people organization where does everybody of the 5,000 really understand what they do every day? How does that bring value to a customer? We were, a much smaller team. And so that was very clear to us. So when, somebody from supply chain would ask, I need you to define this, because if you don't, this is what I cannot do. Then it was very, the technical people were starting to learn, if I deliver it in this way, it's easier for supply chain. So next project, they were doing it differently. And as much as we were creating, they started seeing there's a managing piece after the creation. And so people that are really good at creating were asking for help to the people that are really good at managing. And the people that were good at managing were letting the others create and staying out of it. Because we all knew the value we were bringing to the team.
I love that part. Yeah.
And that made a difference. So as a manager, when you say diversity, it doesn't mean where you're hiring, men, women, different races, genders, or ages, or whatever nationalities, which we had like 12 in our team. But it's diversity of thought. It's people thinking differently because their experiences are different.
Yes.
And that gave a richness, I would say, to our team.
And that allowed, really, I mean, we always called it connecting the dots, but that allowed, as a team, when you would put them all in a room and a subject would come up, if you had 12 people with very different experiences and backgrounds, be it, from markets to technologies to just life experiences, right? Culture and everything. You would come out with, one topic you put on the table, and you would come out with 12 great and very different ideas, right? Now, and obviously, you have to distill those and find which ones would work and where they would work, but the richness of the ideas that came out because of that the diversity of the thinking, but which stemmed from the different diversity of experiences and backgrounds that people had. It's really something to marvel at, when especially when you've been in an organization where functions and market segments and things tend to be stovepiped. So I worked on an aero team, right, where everyone was very focused on aero, and some people had very long careers in it, and so sometimes that creativity outside the aerospace what wasn't as great, but this was something to marvel. The other thing I would say is that from a diversity standpoint, there's you have to get people that are comfortable. Again, it's back to like not being an expert in everything, that comfortable to know that their teammate is better than them at something, right? If it's project management and you're not a great project manager, to be willing to say, pass that baton to them and say, at this stage, I need your help. And that's being vulnerable with your teammate and saying, I'm not really good at this. I know you are, please help me. But that's very critical, right?
And it's critical for you as a leader to do that all the time. It's critical because people will come to you as a leader.
You're role modeling. Yeah, you're more role modeling.
And for you to say, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And they're like, they look at you like, what do you mean? And you're like, I don't know how to do this. What if we do it this way? Let's go. Who might know? And it was great to watch. At the beginning, people looked at Lee and I and said, why did you get success so fast? And I think it's because we combined know-hows and networks. He knew how to develop a product technically. He had no idea how to then, scale it up. How do you create a code in the system, whatever system your company uses, to be able to move that product? How do you do the product stewardship review? How do you, put a price in the system so that you can, somebody can type an order and actually make an invoice and send it to a customer? All that part of the commercial work, which is not simply just negotiating the product, the price, the value, the volumes, etc. But all that it implies to take something from a lab to a scale, have most of what we made was contract manufactured. You had to have contract manufacturing agreements, and so you involved legal. And as we were developing stuff, we had to check IP and patents and things of that nature. And so Lee had all that technical network. I had most of the commercial network. So we never stopped. We joked that, we went for progress, not for perfection. We knew when we had something, it probably wasn't perfect. And it probably, 10 years from now, it's going to be different. But it is a start, and we can improve. And so,
Amazing.
And that helps. So when you were bringing a team together, those networks that you already have in that company, pay very strong attention to those. Who are those individuals that, if they don't know, they know who knows?
Because that's key. You don't need to know.
Particularly in big organizations, right? Where, everything is in a function, in a silo, and it's hard to get to, how do you actually do this? Like a hands-on, execution. How do you do it? How do you get a truck out of our warehouse with a product?
And for the audience that it might be curious, what is Second Life? If you could just summarize briefly what you guys did, what you developed, and whatever you can share for the ones wants to learn more about it. I don't know if you want to share.
Why don't you?
So basically, what our purpose was to find uses for waste. Waste meaning everything that's not a first-grade product. And so when you're making a product, not because you're bad at making the product, but just out of any manufacturing process, you have transitions. You don't make just one single product. You have several products and you make transitions. And so you're going to create waste out of making transitions from one product to another, campaigns, etc. It's good material, or it has some properties, but it's not first grade. What can you do with it? versus, recovering, energy through incineration or just landfilling or whatever it is, whichever way you dispose your waste today. If you can find an application, if you can find a use for it, then it's great, because you might bring a product a cheaper cost for customers, or you might bring, you might add capacity that you didn't have without having to add capital, because now you don't have to sell a premium grade into an application that could perhaps tolerate something different. So we did a lot of that, of finding new uses and applications and understanding the properties of materials. And as we looked at that, we said, well, that applies to the entire value chain, because we have waste, but most of what we make is good product. So we sell a good product to our customers that put it into a manufacturing process that also has waste. And, that step repeats 1, 2, 3 times, depending on the value chain, and eventually it becomes a product. That product gets used and eventually has an end of life. What can you do at the end of life?
You extend the end of life.
Or transform it into something else.
Yes.
And not necessarily trying to bring it back to what it was at the very beginning, right? Because that will require a lot of energy, and sometimes, yes, you avoid landfill, but you create from a life cycle analysis, you create such a cost against the environment to bring that back to its original form that's not worth it. But as it is, what properties does it have, and what can I turn it into? And so we had both commercial and technical people looking at things as they are, and ideating on what we can turn them into. And a lot of the things we came up with were really novel things that nobody had thought about them before. Some things were not novel, were things that somebody looked at it 30 years ago and gave up, because at the time it didn't make sense because of whatever, maybe a technology wasn't there, maybe the economics weren't there, maybe the market was different, but it made a whole lot of sense today. And so we got ideas from people's drawers from 20 years ago, and we got ideas from talking to customers on completely new things that we were working on IP. And we didn't look at things as, this is more sexy because it has IP, and this is less sexy because it doesn't. We were looking at, are we solving somebody's problem, and can we do that, and at the same time be able to repurpose material and avoid landfilling. So for us, it was, for the company itself, you were avoiding cost to landfill. And there's an economical thing about this, because people think about sustainability. They think, well, we're doing good for the environment, which is great. But if it comes at a cost, a lot of companies won't do it, because then we as consumers don't pay for it.
Yeah.
So there is an economical factor. So if we can help the company, save money on landfill costs, be good to the environment, and help our customers get materials at the cost they need, and help them advance their business.
And sometimes the second life becomes the main product. I've seen that in some.
Yeah.
It did. We had histories of that in DuPont more than once. But in our case, we were really looking at, there's value in those materials, and if we use the properties, we can extract the value. So we were thinking, how do properties help? But it was always about repurposing, outfall and or end of life of the products that we made. And of course, it gets tougher and tougher as you move on, because we made a product that then got combined. So for example, you make a fiber, that fiber gets blended with some other fiber that we didn't make.
Right.
And then it gets dyed with chemistry from a dyeing agent that we don't make. And then it might get a finish on the surface that it's another chemical that we don't make. And so at the end, you have a product that part of it is your material, but a lot of it is not. And you have to deal with all of that.
Yeah, so as you go further, obviously, and when you get to end of life, it's experienced a lifetime in whatever use it was, right? And so it's been exposed to who knows what, right? And so you have to actually, it's more challenging, but I'd say the opportunity as you go down the value chain gets bigger, gets more, more valuable, not just to to the company itself, but the whole value chain, right? And even from I would say a social and environmental impact too. So, but you know, and we viewed it, you know, so it's funny because on the technical side, I would, you know, we viewed every opportunity as adding to our material toolbox, right? So every different material, I mean, DuPont makes a ton of materials, and then our customers do a lot with them. And so, as Guada mentioned, we look very much at what are the properties of that material, and then we look at where else could those properties be valuable. And so, from a technology standpoint, we're looking at like how do we advance technologies that will convert this material and maintain those core properties, and maybe put them in a different form that goes into a whole new space. Those are the most exciting ones, right? Versus just putting it back in the original use.
And I would say, Denise, we're not the only ones. We were by no means the only ones. There's people have been recycling, you know, textiles for what, 200 years, 300 years, I don't know, forever, right? So there's lots of things we didn't invent, and there's certainly hundreds of smaller companies doing recycling. If you look at your car, it will have a lot of recycled product in it. You know, mattresses and many others. There's a lot of recycled product that already goes into everyday uses. And so we kept asking ourselves, you know, why us? What is our play in this? And the issue you have a lot of times is you have a product because you play on one market. You don't have access to different markets. And so what we could do, first of all, we were a big company. So we were not in the startup mode of how do I pay salaries next month?
Yeah.
And so our only problem was to innovate, not to pay salaries, which is great for an entrepreneur to be able to focus on your idea versus, you know, how do I raise up money? And so we had that financial peace of mind for a while, right? And because if we don't show results, then it's gone as well.
You do have to. I mean, the company's your investor basically, so
yeah,
you have to show some results.
But you kind of have your investor, which is your company.
Yeah.
But then what that allowed us was to also use the network of scientists we had. We have the network of markets that we were already present on, and that we did that globally. So we could collect things from any place, transform it anywhere we wanted, and sell it anywhere else.
It's kind of Disneyland. You live Disneyland.
If you use it correctly, it's a very powerful asset because you're present on you know, 4 regions. You're in North America, you're in South America, you're in Europe, and you're in Asia. You have contract manufacturing partners all across the globe. You have salespeople all across the globe. You have labs. You know, you have customers, and so sometimes you have the technology in one region, but you have the customer that needs the cheaper product in another region. It so happens that in his region, you don't have that technology. And so we were able to use that to our advantage. And in that way, we were able to bring things to market faster than you would normally do. And that was part of our innovation. That was part of our innovation, to use that business model.
Yeah, it was, and the local partners, like you find in a region, right? They see the value, and that you can bring that global reach, like, and you can bring them growth that they would not have access to otherwise, you know, as a smaller company, say.
Yeah, but for the ones, a question to you. Actually, we're almost heading the end, and I'm going to do a couple of questions, I guess, in the same one. So first, the ones that are listening to us and are not in a very big corporation, like you guys were, and Lee still is. So it's not impossible at all, right? There's many ways to keep doing that innovation. And I think your story is so inspiring because you're saying, Guada, that you are avoiding waste. And I just want to grab that thought of wasting and ask you guys, how much companies, small, medium, big companies, are wasting on creativity when they do not innovate or open this space for innovation? What do you guys think?
The issue is that there's somebody hungrier than you. And so if you don't do it, somebody else will. It's,
I mean, in this day and age, it is, if you're not innovating, you're going to at some point get disrupted, no matter what size you are. To Guada's point, there's someone that's going to come that is going to be innovating and is going to look to take your space, right? So if you don't come up with a new way, or either a new way of doing business or new products or whatever it might be, but if you're not innovating in some way, it's inevitable, I think, that someone will disrupt you. And so I think it's, I mean, some people talk about innovation and they think about just the growth that you have to have from it, right? I actually think it mitigates the risk of being disrupted, because we all know that this is happening so much faster in today's world than even a decade or two ago, right?
It's survival. Yeah. It's kind of survival.
It is survival.
And for the ones that are watching us and maybe are not doing anything at all, right? So one message I always want to send to people is, regardless of where you are, you can start, right? The magical places and sacred places exactly where you are. So what would you say for the ones, not to panic and to start doing something, and also to maybe the ones that are struggling to convince their leadership that this is not linear? What would you say to them? What would you say as a closing topic for us today to encourage them to do it?
I think you need to try. I think you need to try and start small. You don't have to try something huge. You don't have to start, we're going to launch a innovation platform. We're going to train the entire company. It doesn't have to work that way. Lee and I started, the two of us, walking the basements of different plants. But you need competence and you need action. It's not PowerPoint. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in a room. It doesn't happen in a room.
Exactly.
And you need to give people the freedom and the psychological safety to go and try some different things, right? And again, just start small, and it can be from someone on your manufacturing floor, letting them try something different, to you're a business development person, telling them, hey, you can go spend some time exploring maybe an adjacent market to where we sell today, right? But you have to give them that safety, and it has to go and do it, and know that they can fail. Mm-hmm. And because that's a really critical part.
When you asked the question, I think there's two different things. For big companies, the watch out that I would say is, it doesn't happen with a 10% of somebody. Yeah. Oh, we were successful because yeah. We were successful because it was make or break, right? We were taken 100% from our roles and said, this is your new job. This is your new job. Come back and tell us if it's doable or not. But that's what we did. So we wanted it to succeed. So that is a risk, because I've seen it too many times in big companies. We're going to create this growth, whatever project, platform, idea, blah, blah. And so you're going to dedicate 20% of your time to this, and you add on top of what everybody has a 20% of something that nobody can give that 20%. So don't do that. Doesn't work.
And when it's hard, and when it gets difficult, which it does, because innovation is very difficult, because it's not, you can't see the end always, and at least a successful one. And that person will inevitably, it's human nature, they'll go do the other 80% of their job, and they'll focus on that when it gets really hard. You have to be in it 100%.
They have the escape, right? Let me escape.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. That's the escape.
It is. And to smaller companies, I would say you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
Right? You have the agility. You have the agility that big companies don't. So most of our partners, because while we were doing this together, we were in a very big, 200-plus-year-old multinational. We had all the good and the bad of being that. Mm-hmm. most of our partners were much smaller companies that had the ability to do things much faster than we did. They had linear organizations. They had, systems that allowed them to move things faster, run trials, etc. So their logistics, their trials, they were more agile, and that was, the process to approve capital. We needed an equipment that cost $50,000. It would take us a year to approve that in our normal capital process. They would just make a decision, and if it was a good business decision, next month they would say, we'll put the machine, we'll have an agreement, commercial agreement, we'll put the machine, and they would invest, they would take risks. We couldn't. So if you're a smaller company, you might want to present your innovation. You might partner with somebody where you bring part of this and they bring part of the reach or their financial strength or whatever it is that they have that you don't.
But make that a selling point. As a smaller company, make that a selling point, because it's not lost on large companies that they know they're not nimble, they know they're not agile, and so that's where you can certainly find a great partner who has a lot of resources, but you can be that sort of that agile or nimble partner for them. We certainly saw value in that, being part of a large company.
So it's there for everyone, right?
It is for everyone. It absolutely
it is. Again, it takes a village to do innovation, right? And so if you're a nimble, smaller company with there's opportunity for you to partner. If you try to partner with a similar, what you don't want to do. When I said, we were diverse profiles, or a hybrid profile. The same is true for innovation. If we were most successful when we partnered with people that were not like us, because then you complement skills, you complement, abilities. And again, abilities could be, you have the possibility to take a decision in 2 days. And my ability could be, I have, you want to sell this in Thailand, I have a sales rep in Thailand, I can pick up the phone and do it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So it could come from different places, which you complement with, but there are benefits to size, and there are benefits to being small.
Yeah.
So
and
sorry.
No, I was just going to say. So I would just say to to anyone who doesn't is trying to find their way to innovate. It feels very risky to innovate. It really does. But I would say that it's, whether or not you realize it or not, it's riskier to not be innovating today. So it's very much worth investing and finding the right person or the right people to help you, and also partnering with other companies, big and small, to make it a reality.
Yeah, Guada said in the beginning, keep in action, right?
Yes.
To keep in action.
Yeah, and I think it's a muscle you train, Denise.
Yeah.
When you were telling me about Ampliarium, what excited me about Ampliarium is you're kind of the coach, you're kind of the trainer on helping, the muscle belongs to the company.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it for them.
It's a good analogy.
But you're telling them how to train that muscle.
Yeah.
Because it does require training. It doesn't come natural to take risks. It doesn't come natural to show an imperfect prototype. It doesn't come natural to sit with your customer and not know where you want to go. Just have an open meeting of how are we, what can we work on that's meaningful to you and that would require innovation. Not for the sake of innovation, but for the sake of we're going to help you grow. We're going to help you grow your business, which is going to help us, and therefore our partnership is going to be stronger. It sounds great, but yes, it is a win-win, and it sounds fantastic, but it sounds much easier than it really is. It's really hard.
It's easier said than done, definitely.
But you've done it with hundreds of companies, though. That's you've done that, right, as part of the Innovation Center with hundreds of companies, yourself. So you can actually, you're the best of anyone. You're the expert of anyone to actually be able to help other companies do that.
What we were doing is we were kind of the proof muscle, when put to work, works.
Works, yeah.
But there's a process. For us, it was a very painful thing because we didn't have somebody teach us how to do it. So we had to learn, you know, by
and that's
doing.
what I want to talk. I want to talk about. That's the objective with this series. To talk about the pain, right? Because we always see this very exciting things about innovation. We are all excited and passionate about it. But we need to say where it's painful, right? So we can encourage others to keep going. And I think you guys shared a wonderful and inspiring. I actually leaving this very inspired to my own startup right now. So I think it's amazing stories. I want to thank you for the time, for the generosity of sharing all this. I'm so sure the ones who are watching us are going to benefit a lot. And I don't know if you want to say some last words or something for us to wrap up, but I think it was amazing, and I really want to be honored to start the episodes with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. It was great to be able to share our experience, and we root for other innovators to keep doing it.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. So we keep in touch. Thank you. Bye to everyone.
Bye.